We are recording. Contra, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jake.
No, it's my pleasure. And how I'm going to start today is a little different to normal, but I dug it up last night. And as I said before, I'm always keen on organic conversation, but there was a note that you posted that I found, and it's just such an interesting point of view on what Nostr actually represents and why it's
Yeah,
important.
sure.
And I dug it up here. Where is it? Um, Here we go. So you posted this, when is it? November. So maybe 6 weeks ago. I
Yeah,
refuse to stop being a thought criminal. The thought criminal is the person who shows up daily to share unfiltered thoughts, encourage others to reclaim their own minds, and create spaces where clarity is possible. It's someone who understands that in an age of managed anxiety and algorithmic negativity, genuine encouragement is dangerous because it reminds people they're still capable of sovereignty over their own thinking. The thought criminal doesn't reject society. They reject the specific machinery designed to capture minds while calling it connection, and suppress dissent while calling it safety, and eliminate independent thought while calling it progress. Here in the purple verse, speaking plainly, thinking clearly, and encouraging others to do the same is a small act of defiance against the warped reality we see every day. The purple pill helps the orange pill go down. Boom. I mean, maybe we
boom.
end the podcast there. But
Yeah,
Contra,
that's
tell
it.
me, where did the inspiration for that post come from?
A lot of, and I've mentioned this before on several of my posts. If people ask where I pull content from, it, uh, it literally just some of these things cross my mind as I deal with them each and every day. So, it could be a clip of, I see on Nostr. It could be something I'm dealing with in life, a podcast I'm listening to, and I don't remember exactly. I might have read it also, but I think it was a podcast um, from actually a Reformed pastor who deals with this thought criminal and embracing the idea of being a thought criminal, and it just got me thinking like uh, thoughts are dangerous, right? A lot of
Mm,
what people are dealing with today, speaking truth into a society that's constantly manipulated, um, uh, those are dangerous, and so just trying to put that into perspective on what Nostr is at its heart, at its foundation, just got me thinking like this is the free space that like I think people want. Maybe. I mean, for us who are on it, it's definitely a reality, and it's you see this freedom daily as we post on these things. So there's a lot of depth to that post, obviously, and I took some time to write that out well. But essentially, I think it gets down to some of the incentive structures that these modern social media, I should say, legacy platforms, kind of way they disseminate information. And a lot of them are optimizing for, engagement through outrage and anxiety. And I guess I just like to question that narrative with just basic questions and getting people to think clearly rather than just accepting the norm of whatever is being brought out to their in front of their faces, I guess. Um,
mm,
so I think that's kind of where I was going with it. I mean, there is a machinery that's involved in our culture today, I think. And this machinery, I don't think it's conspiratorial by nature. I think it's a reality. I think it's purposeful, and it is emergent from the broken systems that we live in today. And so, especially for us purple-verse people, as I said, Bitcoin and Nostr kind of fixes both of these layers, speaking truth into the information aspect of it as well as the monetary aspects of it. So I think that's kind of where I was going with it, and just speaking freely as a free person, a sovereign person ought to.
mm. It's so cool, isn't it? The process of almost the documentation of your thought processes. And it totally resonates with me, the idea that you just get these things in the moment and you just post them. And I
Yeah.
think in some ways, like that's what's valuable because
Mm-hmm.
as the consumer of said content, I know that that's coming from a place of your heart in a way. You're like, I actually think this right now. It's not like some predefined schedule that's trying to hype up an algorithm
Yeah,
to
right.
create as many eyeballs as possible. It's
Right.
like I saw recently, there's only 3 or 4 thousand daily active users on Nostr.
Hmm.
There's no one here essentially versus 1.5 billion daily users on Instagram. It's
Right.
crazy,
Crazy. Yeah.
but it's different. It's
Hmm.
absolutely different. The whole
Yeah.
construction of it, and let's safe to say, you caught my attention, and that's just one of many posts that I've come across since I, found your account on Nostr, where you've really just like synthesized something so important. And you go, oh, I love that. I've got to talk to this guy at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, let's sit on this idea of the thought police.
Yeah.
What is that, and why does that exist?
Yeah. I think the thought police is essentially, again, alluding back to this machinery of this culture we live in. And when there's a threat to, a societal norm, somebody's freedom, somebody able to speak freely or to act freely, the police will come after you. And whether that be, an X algorithm, an Instagram algorithm, I mean, you name every platform out there, they're going to police that. And because it doesn't fit into their worldview, their structure, it doesn't buy clicks, it doesn't make them money. And I think that's one of the beauties of Nostr is I don't see people on there to make money. That's a huge aspect. That's huge motivations for people on all these other platforms, and which is why you don't see the amount of people probably on here. People are looking for that algorithm to make them bigger, to make them money. And you know what? If I get one zap, one sat on one sentence I say because I'm just thinking of something, I'll take that all day over 50,000 likes, say on X or said protocol or platform. Sorry. So, and I think it speaks to going back to kind of what you alluded to earlier, that freedom, that sovereignty that we have is like, look, I don't need somebody to tell me how to think. I don't need you to tell me what to see in front of me on my thread. Uh, I'm curating this, and the thought police is essentially these CEOs and these organizations that are worth billions and trillions of dollars that really are using its users at they are the product, and I don't think people see that, and they've kind of curated a society to believe these things, and I think that's why Nostr uh, is so beautiful. I think it's just I think people forgot what it looks like to be free, and you have all these people essentially herding the sheep, if you will, and people don't see it. So yeah, thought policing is exactly that. They want you to think a certain way and behave a certain way, and essentially bow the knee at the end of the day.
Mm. It's fascinating, isn't it? Because like, what even is freedom? Yeah,
Great question.
like let's hang on that. So,
Yeah,
was freedom a subject that you were always interested in, and what does it mean to you?
yeah, that's a good question. It's even more interesting for me, just so not to dig too much into my history, into my background, but I come from a more of a military
Share
background.
as much or
Yeah,
as much or as little as you want, Contra. There's no need
uh,
to
yeah,
overdo it.
yeah.
A
So
military background. Okay, wow.
yeah, military background, and I joined because I wasn't fitting in with the education system after I graduated from high school here. I did college for a few years, and I was just like, I feel like I'm being fed crap, and I needed to grow up. And I was like, well, hey, maybe. And I was married at the time as well, so I was married super young. And my wife's like, well, why don't you try the military? And I was like, military is for nerds. Like, that's not for me. I grew up a jock, super competitive. And I sat down one day with uh, a dude by the name of his name's Alex. I don't talk to him anymore, but I still remember it because it was a vivid memory. But he got me sucked into this military mindset and this competition and what the U.S. government, the U.S. military does for its people. And I didn't think a lot about it I was in my late teens at the time and early 20s going into it. And so uh, I essentially allowed myself to be captured by the government with no freedoms, right? I was essentially owned and stamped by a government who told me where to go, when to go, what to eat, and when to eat. And in some senses, it was good for me as a man, not growing up with a father. So structure was good for me. All men need that structure. And I didn't have that. So that was good. But it wasn't until I got out and I transitioned out where I started questioning a lot of things I did, a lot of things, uh, the brainwashing really that really happens in the military. And so that freedom aspect when I got out was like, okay, I'm starting to question all these systems. I was part of this system. What is, what's the purpose of this system? And you know, America, its political figures want you to believe that uh, freedom is free because the people that protect you in your said country. And you know, I started questioning deployments. I started questioning certain wars we were part of in the Middle East, wars I was a part of, and just questioning the narrative and not understanding that there was more things at stake than what I knew. And so freedom, I would say, really began for me understanding it maybe a decade ago to know that
Mm.
we're raised in a system essentially that's captured us. And until I started really questioning narratives and reading books that nobody wants you to read, essentially, it really started opening up my eyes. And so um, I'm not anti-military. I still train with the military often. I do contracting work, but I always feed guys just questions to get them thinking, and because nobody helped me to think that way. And so um, I think freedom is just it's the free will to act and do as you will without anybody impeding on your ability to do something. And that goes from thinking to acting is it goes to using social media to your financial means. And uh, we've all been captured into this system, and uh, I don't think a lot of people know it. Nostr is definitely awake to it, which is why it's so rewarding to be on there because you're around more like-minded people, which is helpful. So that's my basic, I guess, nutshell without
Mm.
getting too many rabbit trails of what
Mm.
freedom is ultimately. But
It's a really fascinating story. In some ways, I wish this was an offline conversation so I could ask some more detail. But
yeah,
shout out to Average Gary, who came on the podcast a couple of episodes ago and
yes,
spoke through a similar experience of joining the military. And there's now a
yeah,
community called Bitcoin Veterans that he's part of. I'm sure you know those guys.
yes, I'm
And
on it.
I've met a few ex-military guys in the Bitcoin space. I'm from the UK originally, but now based in Australia, and I met an Aussie Bitcoiner who was ex Australian Navy, and almost every single one of them has the same trend of story, which is I was doing something that for a certain period of time felt right, and
Yeah,
slowly but surely it got chipped away at, and
yeah,
suddenly you start doing things. You're like, hang on a second, that doesn't make sense. And when
yeah,
you ask the question why, you get reminded that you have no answer. You
it's
are
true.
just a piece in the machinery. And
Yeah,
that itself is an extremely disempowering fact that people who are, in many ways, ideologically driven, this idea of freedom drives a lot of Western military concepts.
yeah,
Um, but do you know what I mean? It just
yeah.
they
No,
don't
for sure,
actually gel.
they don't. Yeah,
Could you,
it's yeah.
without
Go ahead.
sharing specifics, Contra, could you share if was there any, was there a specific moment where you go, oh my God, I can't do this any longer?
You know, I think I've listened to enough podcasts and I've listened and read enough books about most people going down a lot of rabbit holes, and I can't specifically say it was, you know, there was this key moment or this key genesis. There was a genesis. I don't think it was one moment. I think it was a culmination of
Mm,
just a lot of um, certain things that came into my life at very specific times, which I believe are providential, and um, they just got me going down a course where nobody led me. It just kind of
mm,
one thing led to the next, and then it just branched out from there. And I mean, everything changes once you go down that rabbit hole. You don't think the same. You start questioning things you've done in the past, and that's essentially, I think, what you know that the eye-opening moment, if you will, where you become awake. I think that's when things start clicking. You start putting pieces together when you start becoming awake. So I can't specifically say there was one specific thing. It was just
mm.
there was a person here that mentioned something. You know, maybe weeks, months, years later, somebody else mentioned something else, and I started just, you know, in my quiet moments or my downtime, started putting pieces together and reading books and listening to people that just kind of opened up my worldview.
Awesome. And it takes time. It takes
Yeah,
work. Even
it
this
does.
conversation we're having right now, I mean, ultimately what I love about these is it's like, who are you and what
Yeah,
brought you to today?
yeah,
And everyone's completely unique, has these extraordinarily rich and intense and romantic stories that bring you to today.
yeah,
Let's shift to slightly then to talk more about like what that sense of like freedom is. So the act
mm,
of free will.
yeah,
How do you exercise that today versus perhaps in the past where you didn't have that?
yeah. Good question. Um, I mean, for me, it starts in the home. Um, every single day, my main responsibility is making sure uh, I'm present for my wife, giving her everything she needs to structure the house when I'm outside of it, and having the financial means to do that gives her the ability to fulfill her role as the wife, which then leads into my children. So it starts really at home for me, and then giving my kids the things, the tools, the books, the education that I didn't receive, just the always questioning narratives that you're being told. Um, so getting them prepared when I wasn't prepared to essentially face a culture that is really going to be hard pressed against them, and to have answers for them, to push their narratives or their worldviews on the way that I raised them to believe, and to stand up for it. And so as I do that in my house, I go out into a world, and I would love for Bitcoin to be the standard around the world. I know we're in a fight, and it's going to take time. I hope to see it in our lifetime, like everybody does. Um, but I think once that cliche saying, you fix the money, you fix the world. That's a reality, and I don't think it sets in for enough people to understand, because we're run by a financial system that essentially governs everything we do, from governmental leaders to corporations, all the way down into households. It starts with there, but the individual responsibility has to start with yourself first and foremost, to inform yourself, to educate yourself, uh, and then to equip your family, equip the people that are around your sphere of influence, and begin to question their narratives. And I did a podcast with Source and a couple other guys maybe a couple months ago, and you want to talk about somebody who can orange pill somebody, that's your guy. He's mastered it, and I think we can use a lot of his not only the resources he uses, but kind of just um, the I guess the lingo. The He's gotten really good at trying to help people to think in ways like I was speaking about, that aren't normal, that really fight against uh, the times of our society. And so not only financially with Bitcoin, but we can do that with everything. We can do that with Nostr.
Mm,
This is the free space of thinking, and if we can get good at purple pilling people, I deal with a lot of dudes, and I try to tell them all the time to get on it, and they're like, "Well, what's the main thing about it?" And I'm like, "Freedom." And they're like, "Well, what's so free about it?" And I'm like, "It's not run by anybody. Period. It's yours. You design it. You create it. You friend who you want to friend. You're not given recommendations like this is all yours. And on top of it, it can't be censored, and you get to earn Bitcoin on top of it. And then you can zap people for content you like." So these concepts of just the freedom of what kind of what you're asking is I don't people are not awake enough to this
mm,
concept of what freedom actually looks like. And so it takes time, and podcasts are popular just like this one, but I think ultimately at the ground level, it starts with the people in your sphere of influence, and the people you talk to daily, and just getting them to think. I don't think we do
mm.
that enough.
Oh, what an amazing reply. And as you said that, like it starts in the home, I had this really strong feeling of emotion, like
Yeah,
coming right through me. I haven't felt that actually
yeah,
on a podcast before. And largely that's because of my recent experience as a dad of three young kids and actually getting the keys to a house that we own. And just
nice.
a lot of stuff's happened for us that's really important from a kind of stability perspective.
Yeah,
Um, and it's that re-engineering of focus around this is my job.
Hmm.
as the kind of protector provider role for a woman to then flourish in the feminine below that with the
Yeah.
children below, beside is a better word.
Hmm.
Um, but some cool coaching I was doing recently, and I love talking about capital and how you
Hmm.
can create, maintain, grow over time. And part of
Hmm.
that is humanistic. So that
Yeah.
is your relationships, that is your wife, that is your children.
Hmm.
And in that sense, a nice image that I came across recently is this idea. When you go to like I don't think I've ever even been to a party with this, but a movie will have like a champagne tower, right?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
flows off the first level and flows off the second level, then the third, then the fourth. Maybe you could think of
That's
like a
right.
big chocolate fondue or whatever.
That's great. Yeah.
The first cup that you're filling up needs to be you.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it has to be you. Because if you're
Yeah.
not fit, strong, ready, then nothing else works. So providing you're doing that as step one, step two is then your wife.
Yeah.
Because frankly, your kids will move out of home at some point. It's you and her forever.
Yeah.
And therefore, once you've figured yourself out, it's then about figuring out her situation. And then below that comes your kids. And then below that comes everything else.
Yeah.
And if you're filling the cup of someone or something that's below those first two or three tiers,
Yeah.
why? You have to have a
Right.
really, really good reason to not
Right.
be trying to solidify your stored capital in the first three tiers. And so
Hmm.
that resonates a lot, Contra. Have
Yeah.
you always been like that?
No. So, like I said, I come from a broken home. My mom's been married 3 times now. And so I've had essentially my biological father left when I was super young, so I didn't have him in my life ever. I had a stepdad, and then now he's since passed. And then now my mom's remarried to another guy. And so I never had that father figure. And so the, the Marine Corps kind of became that for me in a lot of ways, just the
Mm-hmm.
discipline and structure. So I didn't have that. I did grow up with 8 uncles on one side of my mom's family. So I did have some male figures in my life. Um, they were more of the mindset of work hard, play hard, and so you had this
Mm-hmm.
this concept of working your ass off all day every day, and then when you have some free time, go party it up and live your life. And I tried to go down that road many times, Jake, and it never ended well. It always ended with more problems, especially being married as young as I was. I tried to ruin my marriage multiple
Mm.
times, and thank God my
Wow.
wife continued to have some grace for me and stayed with me. But I didn't have that. And it wasn't until probably around like 2014, 2015, uh, again, going back and reading and listen to some more masculine dudes. And a lot of guys, start with, the Joe Rogans and some of these podcast guys. And some of those concepts are helpful. They really are. But ultimately, biblically, especially for me, understanding the patriarchy and what I'm called to be as a man, I started just really trying to understand, what happened the generation before me with my family, and all my whole mom's side of the family is, I think, all but one has been divorced. So it's 10 kids, and almost all of them been divorced. And I just always got, um, I began to question as I got older, kind of that awakening moment, like I stated earlier, where I was just like, this whole work hard play hard thing, like this isn't working. Like, and so where can I find answers that's going to help me, right? And you talk with your friends and you try to um, glean a little bit from their experiences if they had fathers and stuff. And so again, I don't think it was one moment, but over a period of time, it began to snowball and understand that, like, no, like my wife, first and foremost, she needs me to make sure I'm being responsible with uh, what I'm essentially over, what I'm in charge of. And she really helped to equip me and push me and drive me uh, to work hard, to go after the goals and things that I was going after. And having that foundation at home is key. A healthy household. I'm not really good at work if I'm not good at home, and the same goes
Mm-hmm.
both ways. If I'm not performing well at work, at least my wife can pick me up at the end of the day. So it started with taking care of myself first, myself, understanding my worldview, and then loving my wife like I hadn't seen anybody else in my upbringing do, which is just to, love my wife, provide for her, give her. She has the keys to the castle, the house, and my job is to help her to fill that household. So when I come home, it's it's clean, it's prepared, she has the food that she needs to prepare for the family, And then my kids are growing up with both parents in the house. And so it took time. Uh, I haven't always been good at it. I'm still learning. But I think now with, a lot of systems that we put in place in our own household, and kind of having these, I wouldn't say like they're, family meetings, but we check in on each other a lot. And, when we wrong each other, we confess these things to each other early and often, and just say, hey, I failed you. That I never had many men in my life ever apologize for taking responsibility for things that they had wronged other people with. Men are terrible at it, but I have no problem apologizing now. If I've wronged somebody, and it's really simple. It's just like, they're human, like, so treat them human, right? And so I raise my voice to be manly, to stand up, to be physical. Work out. You need to be able to prepare yourself for this world. And at the end of the day, we need men. The world's not going to run real well without men, masculine men. And I know that term gets thrown out and kind of convoluted in a lot of ways, but I think the ultimate, title, if you will, masculine men is love your wife, give her the things that she needs, and then make sure you're there to help raise your family and your kids. And then, just like you said, that waterfall effect, it bleeds out from there. And I wish I had more kids when I was younger, because if you want to change a generation, you want to change a culture, well, then have more kids, because then I can essentially raise them and teach them with, my worldview, which I believe, I think a lot of us are in a lot of the same worldviews. Is like, hey, just let us live, and let us create the tools we need so that we can thrive as a community. And we have, Nostr is a small borough, small community, but there's people all over the world that I've talked to through Nostr they're doing the same things that we're doing. And so if we start here, we raise it into the next, or we bleed it into the next generation, then I think we can continue to grow. So I do have hope in it, but to answer your question, it's this whole thing's been a process for me, Jake.
No, and same here. One of the hardest things is admitting that you've made a mistake.
Yeah.
It's one of those like obvious tropes that gets rolled out on lots of kind of wellness podcasts. Is accept failure, or equally in like the startup space where I worked for a long time. It's like you want to fail fast or make failure your friend.
Yeah.
Great, but it's actually really hard.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Contra, what I'd love to do is then spin back to this idea of freedom and acting with free will, because it strikes me that it's on a spectrum, and a lot of that spectrum is actually driven by choice. So had you stayed in the military, your ability to exercise free will was limited in comparison to where you're at today. And not that it's the same decision, but you could go and post on Instagram right now if you wanted, or you can post on Nostr. Why obviously will drive the decision as to which, but they're both a form of free will, given one is a centralized platform, someone's digital real estate, you're renting that space until you can't. The other, a protocol that you can build on top of, and the user is the center. They're very, very different, but you're talking to 4,000 people versus 1.5 billion.
Yeah. You get one viral post, you get 10 likes on Nostr, right? You get a viral post on these other platforms, 50,000, whatever, 20,000. Yeah, quite different.
It's crazy. So how do you, we spoke about like focusing on yourself and the home, but this idea of free will, like I pay more taxes than my great grandfather, for sure, because of the way that the tax system has encroached into the financial world. It's backed up by guns. I'm currently in Australia. Basically, no one has a gun. The COVID lockdowns were the most extraordinary experience here, given the lack of ability to react to a government. It was extraordinary. We went to a number of freedom rallies, like anti-lockdown protests, as they got redubbed, and were deemed extremely irresponsible for breaking the chief health officer's rules. Just so ludicrous,
crazy.
And it's like both my wife and my mother-in-law ended up in central Melbourne in handcuffs or partially handcuffs from a police that were being used to protect the decision-making of a obviously fascist agreement between a medical empire and a government. That's what it is, right? And then you call it medical apartheid, because people who got the jab were allowed to do stuff and people that didn't weren't. You
Correct.
get, I mean, you wouldn't be invited back to lunch to most places. But
No.
like, what are we talking about here if we can't talk about it?
Yeah.
And hence why recording and speaking via Nostr is so interesting, because, you know, as a capital allocator, I could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and hours of my time pumping into a YouTube channel over
Mhm.
5 years to just be rug pulled.
Right.
That's like a horrendous counterparty risk that most people with a sunk cost in that platform aren't willing to admit.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, I'm at the start. I don't have to necessarily think about those things right now, and I don't need to make money from this, so I can go in this direction. That's what's beautiful about it.
Yeah.
But like, what is free will, and how do we, you know, how do we build a more free space for us, even in the confines of the playing field that we're given?
Yeah. You really want to push against the structure I see, Jake, and you're right to do so. And I don't think America is very far behind Australia or the UK or
Hmm.
a lot of these other countries. Honestly, I really don't. You know, we talk about a two-party system here in America. I don't believe that. It's definitely a uniparty. It's different ideologies that have the same outcome, which leads you to want to ask the question, well, what's the motive? And I think ultimately you can get down to a motive of obviously power and money. And if you have both of those, then you can control people, right? I'm sure you guys experienced that where you're at and even where you're from. And history doesn't go away. You know, the saying is it will repeat itself. Um, and I believe it will. In America, is we're right at that, you know, that fourth turning that everyone talks about,
Hmm.
right? I think you've even mentioned something about fourth turning before.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I've looked at that. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think this idea of free will is why Nostr is so important. And let me tell you why, right? And even with the mesh networks and all kinds of other technological, you know, networks that these developers are building, which I think are going to be more useful than we really acknowledge at this point. They're cool technology when they first come out. They're a toy. People play with them. But I think at some point we're going to be reliant upon these technologies to be able to communicate with one another, to help one another. And because they will herd people, as you just stated, like in Melbourne, when people come out and speak their voices against, you know, these tyrannical ideas and tyrannical everything, really, um, then I think we're in trouble. And especially like in a place where you're at, where there are no guns. Um, the American citizens, at least the people I deal with the most in my world, uh, are mostly within the confines of, you know, what I believe about protecting themselves, not only from people, bad guys, but from the government ultimately. Like I think they understand that's why the Second Amendment exists, and I think COVID woke us up to that big time. And you know, even so, I had a conversation with Source about this. Even also is that, you know, the left and the right, it's not really it will never be a battle, right? Because the left doesn't want guns. They want more of your style of government, and the right, um, I would say they're the ones who have the guns. They're the ones living in, you know, more rural areas, and they like exercising their Second Amendment. Some of them understand their freedoms, and some of them don't. Um, ultimately, I like shooting. I'm good at shooting, but I've come to a realization that, you know, I'm going to be dealing with the government more than I am with, you know, a bad guy that wants to try to break into my house. That's just the reality. At some point, I don't know when that will be. I don't know when, you know, who will be in charge of our government at that time. But I think ultimately, circling back to your question on this free will, it really comes down to coming alongside like-minded people, families that are going down the same path and are willing to link arms despite not having everything in common, but core basic life principles, and understanding freedom. And again, I think you can define freedom, and many people have different probably definitions of it, but the ability to move uh, freely without interruption, right? I mean, that's one aspect of physical freedom. What other types of freedoms are there, right? I mean, monetary freedom, social freedom, whether it be online or whatever it is. Uh, we need more structures in place to be able to communicate with one another and create businesses, create essentially our own cities. I mean, our own cities, our own places where we can exist without government interference. And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to is it's going to take groups of people that are going down the same path that will fight for the things that we believe. And that's going to be a hard fight for small groups of people when we live in these types of governments because they're supposed to be working for us and they don't. So I think we're at an uphill battle, but I wouldn't pay too much attention to it. I did for a long period of time. Again, going back to what can I influence right now, and that's my family, which then bleeds out from there, and then coming alongside people on Nostr, and not trying to start wars. I like to post some controversy every once in a while just to stir people's brains up a little bit to get them to think. And it's okay if you disagree with me; you don't have to agree, but I'll leave room for interpretation. And I don't think people sometimes, even on Nostr, it's funny. I'll post something, and I'm willing and able and ready to engage back with people, and people will post thoughtful comebacks or thoughtful replies, but usually the discourse doesn't last too long, and I always ask myself why. And it's usually because of time preference. I mean, people don't want to give themselves too much to it, or they run out of ideas, or you can clearly see when AI is being used, and you're essentially being I'm talking to a bot rather than a person and a free thinker.
Painful. Yeah.
It's so that's kind of frustrating, but understanding that's the world we live in, and so having this discourse with other people like you and me are doing right now, I think is
Mm.
how freedom will continue to exist ultimately.
It's like blending together a series of experiences that don't make sense. It's like, hang
Yeah,
on, sorry, I was told that I lived in a liberal democracy, and in the constitution it says you have the freedom to move. This is
yeah,
Australia specifically,
yeah.
and the first thing that happened, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
is there's a bunch of states
Yeah.
that make up Australia, and they closed the state borders. You couldn't travel between the two of them without getting a
Mm-hmm.
certain test. So, well, hang
Mm-hmm.
on. It says in the head terms of the country that I've just
Yeah.
become a citizen of more recently, actually,
Yeah.
that you can move anywhere you want. So why can't
Yeah.
I move anywhere I want? It's like, well, some
Yeah.
spurious health department somewhere has said that it's too dangerous for you to move anywhere. And the point of that is it really speaks
Mm-hmm.
to this idea of you're operating within a system ruled by rulers. And as
Mm-hmm.
and when that system I think, and this is an interesting one, it's like this whole concept of they, which can be
Yeah.
helpful but also unhelpful.
Yeah.
It's a self-protective system,
Mm-hmm.
much like any organic organism in a way. Like the state wants to get bigger, it wants to defend itself, it wants to continue, and
Yeah.
it uses people and ideologies to do so. And
Yeah.
even to have that statement, you've got to have done some work to figure out, well, what do you mean? What is statism? Is that even a
Right.
word? And yeah, I think what's fun though is thinking through like practical steps. Like don't listen to fucking news. I went to a
Yeah.
protest, for example, where they told everyone that hundreds of people were there and someone beat up a police horse. That was the
Mm-hmm.
news.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there, and there were thousands of people from every color, every age, all saying this doesn't make sense. So
Yeah.
they'd capped the attendance by 10x.
Wow.
It's like,
Wow.
hang on, how many times
How?
in my life have I been lied to?
Yeah.
Literally, like blatant lie that I've physically seen a difference to.
Yep.
Um, but perhaps Contra, do you agree with me with this statement that like if freedom's a spectrum and you want to live as close to the end of the spectrum that is freedom itself,
Mm-hmm.
choosing to have your money in Bitcoin is an absolutely critical step on the way there. So, do you think that you live a life full of free will? How am I saying this correctly? Is
Yeah.
your ability to act with free will now better as a result of adopting Bitcoin? And what has that experience been like on that process?
Yeah. Uh, I would say not yet. I would say that it gives me now an out of a system that requires me to still be in it. Although I don't think that we as Bitcoiners can truly exist apart from the system that we currently live in, the fiat system. Um, and I think that goes back to kind of what I stated earlier, as far as, having collective minds come together in, where we live to create systems where we can freely spend our Bitcoin in a circular economy. And so and I think there's certain places around the U.S. and especially obviously in other places of the world that have Bitcoin more of a standard. Um, they are going to be far better off than we will, um, because they've already started it. Now we've started it too. I think we're still wrestling with the tension of both sides of it, and we'll get there. And I think we have good people that are in good positions to help us get there as well. They're leading the charge. But for me personally, I think it's given me um, kind of like, how would I want to say it? Uh, it's like a backup, right? If the system fails, there's enough things on the internet where I can use Bitcoin to shop for a lot of necessities, right? Especially with Jack incorporating Bitcoin into Square, that's huge because I would say there's not a ton of people that use Square. There are a lot of people who use Square, so excuse me for saying that, but there's enough businesses out there that use Square where we could still utilize that. Now, if say, I don't know how it would play out ultimately, um, but would the system, kind of what you ran into as far as like moving, what kind of walls would the government put up for say like a Square merchant if they tried to outlaw something like Bitcoin, which obviously they can't. But if they were to say, hey, you can't, if I'm transacting in Bitcoin, you can no longer convert that over to fiat like Square does now, or vice versa, right?
Mm.
So I think we need to be ready for things like that. I'm sure, you know, I want to say Jack is trying to do the right things, but he's in a different playing field than most of us are. But I would say it gives us a road that leads away from where the rest of society is, for the rest of where our government makes us stay trapped in, right? So
Mm.
um, I think the combination of both, Bitcoin and Nostr together, they give us something to start with, and we need to keep building, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Absolutely agree. And I was struck by this idea as you were speaking, which I'm sure you've come across before, which is the idea of building on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, yeah,
And in particular, it's quite a cool concept when you look at like when and how Bitcoin was created. And
yeah.
it's really like a 50-year process of computer science compounding and
Yes.
compounding and compounding till eventually there's a breakthrough that
Yep.
we discover digital scarcity.
Hmm.
And again, people don't understand the profound nature of that statement I just made.
No, no.
But I wonder with this kind of societal structure question, and a lot of what Jeff Booth will talk about resonates a lot in terms of like you can't fix a system from within the system. You have to create
Yeah,
something new.
yeah,
I agree with that. But as I'm sitting here now, I'm thinking, well, actually, like, the real estate market, it doesn't need to completely change. Like the idea
no.
of private property is a concept that could remain. It's
True,
just that the way that we transact for it could be different because you're
true.
using a different base layer money. Or
Correct.
maybe the Australian dollar is suddenly pegged to Bitcoin rather than the
Yeah,
central bank bond.
yeah,
So it's not like we need to completely tear down what's already been built. It's about incorporating something in with a superior feature set than before.
hmm,
Um, because it was interesting. You immediately went to like the operational issues of using Bitcoin as a Bitcoin maxi every day to fulfill daily requirements.
yeah,
From a freedom of will perspective, for me, moving into Bitcoin was more around like as an investor,
hmm,
most or a traditionally managed portfolio of assets would have 100% counterparty risk.
right.
And that is not something that people understand. It's like you've got a wealth
No,
advisor looking after a bunch of things that essentially you have to ask permission to get your
hmm,
stuff. and
Yep.
maybe the stock market will be closed, or maybe the banks are closed, or maybe your wealth advisor's on holiday, or you name it, right? Or actually they
Yep.
decide you're a felon of some form because you posted something on a website, and now
Yep.
they've gone and completely frozen all your assets. Or you
Yep.
happen to be a nationality that's at war with someone, and all your assets get frozen because of new sanctions. Like, who knows, right? But by
Right.
moving your wealth into Bitcoin, your counterparty risk is so much better in
Mm-hmm.
self custody that my freedom of will has improved as a result. So I think
Yeah.
this idea of freedom is something that you can actually cherry pick certain bits and pieces that improve your ability to have freedom of will. Like, another would
Correct.
be an employment contract.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have built yourself a position of Bitcoin, which I've seen multiple people do now over the last 5 years that I've been meeting up with at Bitcoin meetups, where they were accountants or electricians, and they've just been stacking Bitcoin diligently for 5 years. They're now taking caravan trips around Australia, or they're having a sabbatical, or they're starting their own business. They've built themselves a position of freedom that previously wasn't there. So
Correct.
I guess what I'm getting at is there are practical things that we can do every day that you can choose to live a more free life.
Yep.
Because sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming, can't it? It's like, how am I even going to, oh, fuck.
Yeah,
What do I do?
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I think that you're exactly right. We give ourselves an opportunity, and I think that's what we want. Is it starts with
Mm,
an opportunity, right? And Bitcoin gave us that
an
opportunity,
idea.
an
Mm,
idea, and that idea is going to have consequences. And I think that's why governments haven't adopted it, because there will be consequences, and people are going to lose power and money ultimately, right? And
mm,
you become more free and more sovereign because of it, and that's a threat to somebody's livelihood or a system and its
mm,
livelihood. And heaven forbid, I don't know how many empires we have to see fall, but ultimately it all leads to the same place.
mm. Yeah, it's that process of spring, summer, autumn, winter, and round we go
Yeah,
again. And
here we
it
go.
builds on itself.
Yep.
Contra, okay, so we got give or take 5-10 minutes left. This is a big
Yep.
question that we would never be able to answer in 5 minutes, but you
Okay.
referenced the Bible earlier. So
Yes.
I'm intrigued what you learn from the Bible and how it helps you every day.
That could be a whole episode on itself, Jake. Uh,
One day
uh,
I'll do much longer
yeah,
conversations and I'll organize in person and stuff. But
good.
yeah, just if, a shorter version of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, I grew up in the Roman Catholic Church um, until I was 18 years old. I was forced to go by my mom, and I went through all of the steps that you could possibly go through, or that you're required to go through, and I didn't understand any of it. I didn't understand. Like, I had this concept of God. I had uh, how deep it was, not very. But I did have this concept, and it wasn't until I got married. I was married at 20. I wouldn't say until maybe 10 years after I was married. My wife kind of grew up more in the Protestant Christian church, and we never really had faith faith driven conversations. We went to church a few times when I was in the military with some friends and stuff, and but it was never just a big aspect in our life. So without getting all the way into the story, essentially, there was a tipping point on this one. So there wasn't many on others, but this one was it, where my marriage was kind of, on the rocks. I was working a ton. I was always gone, obviously, in the military, and I was doing lots of training and gone and doing things that was uh, definitely immoral and unethical, and was hurting my wife and my marriage. And ultimately, she was like, "I'm going back to church," and I was like, "Have fun. Looks like I get football on Sundays, right? All to myself." And but then I started seeing changes in her, right? And it just started getting me going back to the kind of the other stories, where it just started, these questions started kind of poking my soul a little bit. And I was like, well, I started picking up books that she just had laying around. And I posted this actually on Nostr about a book called The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. And that was more or less one of the first books that I've read probably within 48 hours. I couldn't put it down. And just uh, it gave me a sense of like, this makes sense to me. Like, the way that I've experienced life, the way I've experienced the world, how it operates, in its fallen nature with the corruption and the evil and the good. Like, yeah, we live in a spiritual world, and ultimately, I just dug in, and I'm still learning. Obviously, I've been on this faith journey for 24, so 11 years now. I've grown tremendously in my knowledge. I read more dead people than I read living people. Obviously, nobody's living in the Bible right now, but um, a lot of dead theologians that kind of just sparked historically uh, politics, economics, obviously theology, but it's all driven and centered around theology. So that's how essentially I came to it. And then just seeing myself ultimately, right? I'm gonna to give you the gospel message, right? Like I was a sinner, I was depraved, and I was in need of help. And I'd essentially done everything that I thought I could do to make myself better, and I just really couldn't. And so, you know, I learned why Christ had to come and save sinners because we couldn't fulfill what God required of us. And he did that. He did that on behalf of the people that he loves. And ultimately, I follow him. I put my trust in him. And my life is only since that day and continues to, be more fruitful because of it. And so I just challenge people to dig in, ask questions. Like there's so many, I understand like Nostr's reach is global, obviously, and I'll get lots of pushback from different people all the time. But I'm willing to engage in those conversations, and it's more or less just to help people to see uh, there's truth, and this truth that I came across, and I'm not trying to be pluralistic. This is the truth that I believe in, and I think I can answer or go back and forth with people to come to a conclusion on this is reality of life, and the Christian faith has lasted all these years, and I live by it and help my wife and teach my boys in the same faith. So that's essentially kind of it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I immediately just popped on my phone as you were explaining that, and I've just bought the Kindle version of that book, so I'll have a look at it.
Yeah,
Somehow, and I've talked about this in the past from a why would you create a podcast perspective, and I talk about the idea of leaving digital breadcrumbs, and people
yeah,
find those breadcrumbs and they eventually catch up
mm,
and they get
yeah,
to you.
yep,
And I've done that many times with other people, and I know that happens with the content I've created over the years because I get emails and messages from people from all sorts of different parts of the world.
yep,
But as I grow older, I get more spiritual. There's no doubt about that as a trajectory.
yep, yep,
And I've had some already fascinating conversations on this podcast about like consciousness, what God might mean to someone.
yep,
And I love what you mentioned there about like a book that you just had lying around.
yeah.
Like,
Right. That was the
what are the
breadcrumb.
chances? What are the
That was the
chances?
breadcrumb.
But there's the
Yeah,
breadcrumb, and you go, boom, I'll take that. And
yeah,
that is then how you seed an idea. And that's
yeah,
what's so cool about all of this because it's totally
yeah.
unique, right? No one else has the
Totally.
same
Yeah.
life experience.
And I think one of the pulls to that book, Jake, is it was coming from an atheist
Mm.
who had converted to Christianity. So I had lots of questions, just like I think we go down all these rabbit holes that we've kind of already talked about a little bit. This was a rabbit hole for me as well. And as I've gotten older, uh, I picked that thing up, and like I said, I couldn't put it down. But it was answering all the questions that I had. Um, Not super deep, but deep enough for me to at least grasp the concepts of what was being said and being defended from scriptures. And that I tell you, when I was done with the book, that was probably the first time in my life where I was like, I know this information now. It's kind of like when you get to that point in Bitcoin, you're like, now I got to do something. Now I got to buy Bitcoin. Like I understand it now.
Mm.
Now I need to buy it.
Mm.
It was
Mm.
that moment kind of where I was like, okay, I think I believe this. Like I feel it in my soul. I believe this. Now I need to do something with it. And I remember coming to my wife and just telling her like, well, what do I do now? Like I think I believe, this Jesus that came into this world to save sinners from themselves and from God. And she's like, well, just put your faith in it, keep reading the Bible and live out what it says and the way that Jesus lived. And I was just like, that's it. Like, I feel like I need to do something, right? And I
Mm.
feel like I need to enact certain things in my life. And uh, it really, obviously, it's a process. It's still a process. But I've learned so much. Just like you said, there's breadcrumbs everywhere. These dead theologians, a lot of them from Europe, from the early church, they've given me more enlightenment than anybody of our time has. And it's helped me to just, again, structure my family first, uh, how to organize it, structure it, and then live it out. And it's been nothing but a blessing, and obviously very super fruitful for us. And so I implore everybody to at least pick it up and read it, and at least have a conversation, ask questions at the end of the day.
Mm. Well, and I think if there's anything that's true from the last 5 years, if you haven't asked yourself the question, why do I know what I know?
Right.
Then you're not asking a key question.
Yeah, you're right.
Because
Yeah.
the information that has been shared and conditioned into us from an extraordinarily young age through the school
Yeah.
systems, you have to start asking that. Because
Yeah.
even like, for me growing up in England, we were taught the kings and queens of England.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And I can't remember them all now. But like,
Yeah.
that is a long list of people that won.
Yep.
And so the truth is, there's someone on the other side of that.
Yep.
And you can get into Taoism and yin yang and all this kind of things.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
there's a winner and a loser. That doesn't mean that
Yep.
the loser's story was wrong.
No.
They just lost that
That's right.
battle.
That's right.
The war continues, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, Contra, well, mate, thank you so much for sharing your time today. And it's always amazing to learn from people like yourself. So, as much as I would love to carry this on for another 2-3 hours, we'll call it there. Is there anything you'd like to leave anyone with just to close things up?
No, I appreciate your time, Jake. I appreciate this, and hopefully we can do it again and talk about more Nostr, more Bitcoin, or life in general. But
Awesome.
no, I encourage everyone to continue to remember that we have more in common uh, than everybody's telling us, and that I
Mm.
think ultimately we all have this feeling of what's going on around us, and change needs to be implemented. And at the end of the day, look in the mirror. We're the change.
Mm. Awesome. Great vibe to finish with. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Contra.
Yeah. Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.